Good morning and welcome to another episode of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut, our biweekly conversation in which AARP staff and volunteers talk to Connecticut decision makers and policy program advisors about the things that are of interest to older residents. My name is John Erlingheuser and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Community Outreach here at AARP Connecticut. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by one of our great AARP Connecticut volunteers, Mr. Art Marcelynas. So thanks for being with us today, Art. And why don't you
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your background and yourself and what you do here for AARP?
Okay, good morning, John. Thank you. Well, most of my career was spent at the Public Utilities Commission, PURA. I have 32 years of regulatory background, mostly in electric rates, policy, and procedures. And the way I assist, after I retired a couple of years ago, I hooked up with you at AARP and to help in your advocacy and outreach as it relates to those subjects. So I try to use the experience I gained at the agency to help seniors and others understand the complexities of their electric rates.
And that's really great. And we can't do much of what we do at AARP if it weren't for the great cadre of volunteers like Art and others. And so we certainly do appreciate Art's expertise, particularly in this complicated area here in the state of Connecticut. Now, it's also my great pleasure to welcome Stefanie Keohane, and I think I said that right, who is the Supervisor of Technical Analysis of the Clean and Affordable Energy Division at the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority. And that's quite a mouthful, as you can see, everyone. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the functions of PURA, what the role is at the utilities, with the utilities here in Connecticut, and what they cover and what they don't cover.
Sure, great. I just wanted to thank you both for having me. It's nice to see you both and for highlighting PURA and this really important topic. So as you mentioned, in part of the unit here, at the Public Utilities Regulatory Authority, or PURA, that's focused on the clean and affordable energy. But really just taking a step back, what does PURA do itself? We're a quasi-judicial state agency, and we're charged with regulating investor-owned electric, gas, water, and telecommunications companies that operate in Connecticut. So our mission is to ensure that utility companies provide safe, clean, reliable, and affordable service and infrastructure to utility customers throughout Connecticut. So just an example, what do we do on a day-to-day basis? PURA staff review utility requests to change certain components or charges on customers' electric bills. I will say though, and you kind of said, what are some things that PURA doesn't do? So one of the things PURA does not directly regulate or oversee is the electric supply charge as a part of your customers' electric bills. That is kind of set at a wholesale regional level, but there are other certain elements, the distribution component, there's some public policy costs in there. That's most of those, the utility charges flow through an approval process or reconciliation process through PURA. A few other things that we don't touch directly, things with internet and computer services, cable TV rates and services, cell phone rates and services. I know we get some questions about kind of where we fall in that, but definitely electric, natural gas, water, utility matters pretty much fall before us.
So there's a lot of the work that you do that PURA does that really does have an impact on a lot of the areas that are critical for residents in general, but particularly people that are 50 and older, who many of whom live on fixed income. So it's important work, and I'm glad that PURA is always willing to work with AARP so people are aware of that work. So I'm going to turn it over now to our great volunteer, Art.
So just to clarify, you mentioned on the supply side, you said that PURA doesn't regulate, you don't regulate the rates, but you do have regulatory oversight of their behavior and practices. So customers can call PURA if they have problems with their licensed supplier, right?
Absolutely, for licensed supplier. And there also is a procurement process that the utilities, with help from the Office of Consumer Counsel, go through, and that kind of flows through PURA as well. I just want to be clear that the actual charge is not set by PURA, but the supplier, there certainly is a very important role that our PURA's Division of Education, Outreach, and Enforcement does in providing consumer protections around electric suppliers. And so if they do have issues, definitely call our well-equipped support staff there that can help customers walk through that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, John introduced you as being involved with the Clean Energy and Affordability Unit at the agency. Can you tell me about the goals of the unit? what is happening there, why that unit was established, and
Sure.
okay.
Yeah, Art's seen many reorganizations through PURA over time. So our current organizational division, the Clean and Affordable Energy Unit, is part of a broader team of staff here that really serve as a functional kind of technical staff services. We have a series of, at any given time, up to 100 or more investigations, we also known as dockets or processes for really kind of hearing stakeholder opinions, building record evidence, and ultimately writing up a decision that often directs utilities or another party to do something or to not do something, and those are voted, our decisions are voted on by a 3-panel of commissioners. And so the Clean and Affordable Energy Unit focuses specifically on docketed matters and investigations that fall under what its title says, clean and renewable programs that the utility oversees for their customers, so customer offerings, as well as our unit looks at utility energy affordability proceedings, so any utility offerings for repayment programs, the low-income discount rate, which I know we're going to talk about, that falls under our unit. Our team also supports various initiatives under PURA's Equitable Modern Grid proceedings that launched a couple years ago. So 2 key programs that came out of that my team has been involved in is establishing statewide programs for the deployment of electric vehicle charging infrastructure, as well as energy storage or battery storage systems that both residential and commercial customers can apply for and participate in receiving incentives. Kind of a 4th part or goal of our unit is supporting the agency's review of electric utilities requests for various rate adjustments through a reconciliation. There's an annual reconciliation process that happens. It affects, as I mentioned earlier, certain components of a electric customer's bill, and so we're involved in that review of those materials and investigation associated with that.
So that's quite a bit of work that falls into the division that you do. And
I'm biased, but I think it's a lot of what's really exciting at PURA. I mean, there's a lot of work that happens, and I think we're lucky that we get a lot of the kind of cutting edge type topics, but also the ones that really impact ratepayers in terms of what affects their bottom line in terms of their bills and all that. So
and so along those lines, let's talk about one of the issues you briefly mentioned. And a few years back, if I'm not mistaken, it was after Superstorm Isaias, where people had extended power outages, and a lot of low-income seniors and others were impacted in a very negative way because of the extended outage that were experienced through that storm that caused them to lose food and medicine and other things. We were looking for ways to really address the issue of affordability for those folks. And AARP supported one of the provisions of the legislation that came out as a result of the study and investigation that came after the storm, and it was called the Take Back Our Grid Act. And as a part of the Take Back Our Grid Act, it required PURA to create a low-income discount rate that people could apply for. And, I know PURA now is in the process of dealing with that. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about the low-income discount rate?
Great. Yeah, no, it definitely spurred on by the Take Back Our Grid Act, which was supported by AARP and lots of other members. As you mentioned, a kind of big public outcry a couple summers ago in terms of that, some of the utility storm response and things like that. And so one of the positive things I think that we can point to is the development of this low income discount rate, which I will say PURA worked with to design really kind of from the ground up with both the utilities, Eversource, United, Illuminating, many other stakeholders from state agencies, as well as advocacy groups, including AARP. And so this is ultimately a program designed to provide direct energy assistance for income qualifying residential electric customers. I want to be clear kind of at the upfront what specifically this program that we're talking about. And so what it looks like is it'll be a discount applied as a % reduction to eligible electric customers' total monthly bills that's based on income eligibility guidelines. So kind of the baseline level, or we call it tier 1, will be a 10% discount off each monthly bill. And for those customers that demonstrate the greatest financial need, they'll be eligible for a 50% discount. And then I'll talk a little bit later about like how to know which one you may qualify for and all of that. But I just wanted to also spend a minute kind of high level, big picture. What was the purpose of really kind of trying to establish this low income discount rate? And I think that's important for folks to understand too. is that really our goal, as you mentioned, John, was to take a hard look at the affordability of electric rates here in Connecticut and look at the best practices kind of in other states. And there was a lot of reference to a benchmark essentially of 6% of a household income, no more than 6% of household income should be spent on energy costs as a kind of affordability metric to follow. And so using that as a rough guide, if you will, we looked at coming up with discounts to apply to the monthly bill. And really the approach is intended to reduce the cost ultimately of all electric customers, residential electric customers' unpaid bills, which is this kind of complicated term and concept known as uncollectibles, but ultimately they're paid for by all ratepayers. And so there is also a detriment in terms of service disconnections and reconnections. If customers are losing service and coming back online afterwards, there's, costs and obviously more than quantitative costs, like, life impacts that are associated with that process. So trying to avoid those processes as well is something that we're trying to achieve here with the low income discount rate. So, and just thinking about it from like a tangible example of a customer previously had, let's say $150 electric bill and could only pay $75, $100 towards that bill in a given month. Previously, there was no real benefit for that customer kind of providing that partial payment to the bill. The outcome was the same, right? They might end up with terminating service. We're hoping now with the discount rate in place, the aim is to make the bill more affordable so that the customer is more able and encouraged to pay a reduced bill in full and on time. And that also can reduce the need for any repayment programs and certainly the service disconnection, reconnection process as well. So that's really the kind of intended hope and outcome. We did look at some similar programs that exist in other states and tried to kind of glean best practices from those as well.
So I would be remiss if I didn't say, AARP was instrumental in creating something called the Low Income Energy Advisory Board. AARP State Director chaired it for a lot of years. This is something we kind of looked at long before that storm and have been interested in doing. And I have to say, all of the utilities are now taking credit for this low income discount rate, and those that are going, water and gas companies that are going before the PURA looking for rate increases are bragging about the fact that they're going to implement a low income discount rate. But really, it's the work of PURA and groups like AARP and other low income groups that fought for a long time to get this, and for all of the reasons that Stefanie, you put forward. So kind of having said that, I'll turn it back over to Art.
So Stefanie, if people think that they might qualify or are eligible for the low income discount rate, what should they do and how do they go about determining their eligibility?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's this term that Eversource and United Illuminating, or UI, use called financial hardship. And so it's important for folks to understand if they are designated by their electric utility as financial hardship already. So if you do know that and you are designated, you're maybe receiving some other protections that fall under that classification, you're already automatically enrolled to receive a 10% discount each month. Of course, many folks may have questions or not sure if they're designated as financial hardship. So in that case, we definitely encourage you to call your utility directly. I will say if you receive any state or federal public assistance, government benefits, for an example, would be a Medicare savings program, perhaps Section 8 housing assistance. In developing this program, we were sure to kind of have the proof of eligibility kind of cross-reference existing programs to make it as seamless as possible to kind of demonstrate that eligibility without going through the whole proof of eligibility kind of conversation, because that can be burdensome on customers as well. So basically, if you can demonstrate that you're receiving assistance from, there's a list of multiple other public assistance programs. I just mentioned a few here. And when you reach out to your electric utility to kind of just confirm that you're already in this other program receiving benefits, then they can, code you essentially in their system as financial hardship, which will offer additional protections. And then that again gets you into the discount rate at the 10% level. If you're not perhaps participating or receiving public assistance benefits, there is also a household income based kind of qualifier. So you can just kind of go through the process from that perspective. I did mention earlier that households with the greatest need, there is a greater level of discount. And so, John, some of your members may fall under this category. So this is important to make sure that they're that they know that they actually need to take some action to get that higher level 50% discount. And so again, there are certain public assistance programs. If you receive SNAP benefits, the temporary assistance for needy families, these kind of have certain income eligibility requirements that would make you qualify for the 50% discount level. Again, so you'll just need to reach out to your utility and provide that kind of proof of participation or proof of receipt of those benefits. You can also, as an alternative to just calling your electric utility, you can reach out to your local community action agency if that's convenient for you, and they have the ability to kind of work with the utility to code you as financial hardship and to also then enroll you in this low income discount rate.
So let me just ask a quick follow-up
Sure.
question. So, right, the rate doesn't start till January, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So so customers won't start seeing this and like applied on their monthly bill until their January 2024 statement.
But they can enroll now, and enrollment, and it's ongoing, right? There's no hardened deadline for enrollment.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's no enrollment is ongoing. It's not going to be applied retroactively, if that makes sense. So whenever you enroll, it'll apply to your next month's bill.
Moving forward.
But there's no with some other of the repayment programs, or there's kind of like a window of participation there. That's not the case here with the low income discount rate. I will say, for, as I mentioned, if you're already coded as financial hardship, the utilities have been doing work. I want to kind of give credit where credit's due over this past year to sign those folks up automatically for the low income discount rate. So in some cases, you might not need to do anything, and you'll see it on your bill come January, February. So
that's awesome. Art, off to you.
Okay, so your unit also deals with clean energy. I'm just wondering if you can explain maybe some of the programs or how customers can take advantage of participation in renewable energy programs that are existing right now.
Sure. So there are other programs aside from the low income discount rate or repayment programs that we were talking about that the utilities offer, as you mentioned, Art, that PURA has had a role in trying to shape or make more available, let's say, to customers. And so one of those is the Residential Renewable Energy Solutions Program. So another mouthful, but essentially this is the program if you're looking to install solar at your home, or either from a company through buying or a leasing program. There's different options for getting compensated through your electric rates. And that is a program that has been in place for a number of years, but kind of was retooled based on some statutory changes a few years ago. And so RRES for short is essentially the program to look into and ask your utility about if you're interested in kind of getting incentives for having solar. So the other programs that were maybe more tied to the equitable modern grid that I mentioned earlier, if you have solar or don't have solar, but you're interested in kind of that battery backup if your power goes out, there are like upfront incentives for customers to purchase a battery storage system for your home. Again, it could be paired with solar, but doesn't have to be. Then if you're thinking of purchasing an electric vehicle, or if you already have one, there's an at-home charger, incentives for at-home charger program, as well as incentives for public charging stations to kind of build up the network across the state. So for folks who plan to in the future maybe purchase a vehicle, when you look to charge away from home, there'll be that network available to you. So those are a couple other things that the utility is working on with PURA and other stakeholders. And I'm happy to share some of the utility websites with more information there.
Sure, that will be great. And before you do that, let's talk just before I turn it to Art to close us out for our last question.
Yeah.
Why don't you talk just for a minute or two about some of the other, so we talked about some of the energy efficiency, environmental programs that people have the opportunity to take advantage of. We talked about the low income discount rate, which is new and we're really excited about. You know, what are some of the other things? Somebody may not be eligible for any of these things, but they still have trouble paying for their bills. What are some of the things they can do potentially to help them with the bills?
Yeah, thanks for bringing us back, John. So if your income is just above, let's say, for not qualifying for the low income discount rate, but you maybe have a past due balance or struggling month to month to pay your bills, both electric and gas utilities offer what we call flexible payment plans for any residential customer that's not tied to your income eligibility. So some of the parameters, you can kind of tailor what works best with you with working with the utility. But basically, if you have a past due balance, you may be able to get a repayment plan up to 18 months. Whereas before it was much shorter, which means maybe higher monthly payments. Another option is having a lower down payment if that's kind of what you need and meets your financial needs in that moment. But I do want to emphasize that those repayment plan options, if you have accrued a past due balance, are available to any residential customer for both gas and electric utilities, and to absolutely call your utility company and to talk through what your options are, and to make sure that it is something that you can afford and kind of maintain based on your financial circumstances.
And just quickly, I know we talked about a lot of these different things, and there have been a lot of questions in the past. Third-party electric suppliers.
Oh yeah.
If you're applying for the low-income discount rate, are you able to have a third-party electric supplier? And then along the lines of third-party electric suppliers, if you are a hardship customer, low-income customer, are you allowed to even choose a third-party electric supplier regardless of whether or not you're on the discount rate?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there have been some changes recently to this based on the passage of a new law. So I will hope to do my best here to clarify. So yes, if you are receiving a low income discount rate, again, which begins in January of next year, and you are a designated financial hardship customer, you will be able to, if you choose to, sign up with a third party electric supplier.
And those folks are going to, I mean, because under a lot of the reasons why before you weren't allowed to, if you were hardship customers, because they were overpaying many times with the third party suppliers. But with the recent change in law, PURA, AARP, and others work for, they are going to be guaranteed that their supply rate will be no higher than standard service, and in many instances lower than standard service, correct?
Yes, that is now the electric suppliers under statute are legally mandated to make sure that if they enroll a customer who is a financial hardship, that customer pays the standard service rate, as you mentioned, or lower. And so how to work that all out and the details, that is being worked out and between the utilities and PURA and other stakeholders currently, but that change is also going to go into effect in January. So it's kind of two separate things that happened, but I do, it's good for you that you pointed out, John, that you can be on the low income discount rate, and now financial hardship customers have that additional protection of going with a supplier, but that they won't be subject to these really high, variable rates that we were seeing in the past.
And that's great. And we like to point that out because, we don't encourage people to go on a supplier. We don't discourage them. We just want to make sure they have the tools to do what's right for them and potentially save the most amount of money they can. So that's great. So now I'm going to turn it over to Art and to ask our final question, and then we'll wrap up.
Sure. Stephanie, earlier in the interview, you talked about the various proceedings, and there were many. I'm just wondering if consumers are interested in participating in rate cases or some of the other grid mod dockets that you talked about, how they would go about doing that, where they would find the information, and if they want to get involved in that kind of quagmire, frankly.
Right. There's a choose your own adventure, right? You can be as involved as you want, and we hope to see many faces in our hearing rooms or on Zoom. So at the kind of most involved level, you can provide public comment in any hearing or technical meeting. Certainly Art mentioned a rate case. We do many other dockets. The low income discount rate was a separate docket. If you have ideas, suggestions, complaints, we'll kind of take it all in these public comment periods there's always time reserved on agendas for that. And so at the one end of the spectrum, we also take written comments or just kind of public comment in writing form. You can submit those through docket. I will say you have to kind of know where to look, fortunately or unfortunately, in trying to find which topic that you're most interested in, because we're organized kind of like a judicial system. So there are docket numbers assigned with each topic, how to research which docket or information you're interested in. But then once you do that, it's pretty straightforward in terms of uploading written comments or finding out when a meeting date is and trying to show up if you have that availability. If that level of involvement is too much, but you're just kind of want to understand what's happening, keep up to date, we have an ability to sign up for email updates for dockets that are happening. So you might get a bunch of notices of things that are happening, and then you can choose, your level of involvement. I also want to make a plug. We've had a great team in the past year really put together both a quarterly report that PURA issues as well as an annual report. If you want to know what have we been up to as a state agency, everyone has the right to know, certainly. And so we have little kind of blurbs and snippets of key docket summaries that have happened looking back in the past quarter. And then we have a longer, kind of more comprehensive look back at an annual report. So if you had maybe heard something in the news or something and wanted to know where it ended up, looking at that annual report might be a good starting place for you as well.
So before I wrap up, I know, so why don't we give the folks some information in terms of doing some of this stuff. So we talked about different ways they may need to contact your utilities for some of the programs that are out there. What are some of the ways they can get a hold of the utilities, UI, Eversource?
Yeah, I would pick up the phone and call is always an option. I know that they have, depending on their call volumes, you might have to wait a few minutes. I know they also have their automated systems that they're trying to process folks. I know with the low income discount rate coming online, they've been doing a lot of work to prepare and hopefully be ready to take any additional demand in terms of calls and things like that. There's a lot of information on their websites as well, especially if you're interested in looking at some of those solar or battery storage kind of programs. You can always, if you're having an issue, as Art mentioned earlier, PURA has a consumer affairs unit, folks that can call with questions or try to help resolve issues as well. So we don't want to leave customers stranded with no answers, for sure.
That's awesome. So that was really great, Stephanie, having you so much information, and I know our folks are really going to be appreciative of it. And when it comes to the low income discount rate, AARP volunteers are going to be calling different members that they think might be eligible as well, because I know there's that population that'll be kind of automatically enrolled, but there, as you pointed out, there's going to be a whole nother group of people that are not. So we're going to do member to member calls to make people who potentially are aware, so they can potentially enroll in the program. And I just want to say, it's really great to have our volunteer, Art Marcelynas, with us. I lean on him a lot when it comes to a lot of these issues, so I appreciate the great work he does. Are any closing comments from you briefly?
No, it was nice to see Stephanie. People should know a couple of years before I retired, I had the opportunity to work with her, and the state is very blessed to have her working for them on their behalf.
And similarly, we miss Art's talents and certainly advocacy around many issues and education, really. I think it's an important role, and I'm glad to see you continuing to do it for AARP members. So
well, and I really want to thank you as well, Stephanie, and all the team at PURA, in particular. The chairman, Marissa Gillette, has been really great. We've done a lot of work with her, educating the public about PURA and how folks can get involved. And so this is just a continuation of that great work when it comes to making people aware of what they need to know when it comes to utilities and the regulatory process. So with that, I thank you all for joining us this morning, and I hope you pay attention to our schedule and join us for another edition of Coffee and Tea with AARP Connecticut. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.